All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I am smiling from ear to ear because I have the honor of introducing our next guest speaker. Dr. Jason James will be presenting A Gap Doesn't Have to Turn into an Abyss. Dr. James is a full-time faculty member at Wilmington University, where he instructs doctoral level business and educational leadership courses. Dr. James serves as a mentor and coach at Merit, and Merit includes minority engineering, regional incentive training. Over time, he has come to realize that it's never too soon to close the gap. Please help me welcome Dr. Jason James.
So, I have a confession. But before my confession, I have a couple of questions. And we'll start off very innocuous. And I'll ask the question slowly so that you can hear me. Who is currently wearing braces on their teeth because of a gap or because of crowding? Show of hands, please. Okay. Who is currently wearing braces on their teeth only because of a gap? Okay. Who is currently wearing braces on their teeth only because of crowding? Okay. So, it's a little innocuous, wearing braces on your teeth to close a gap or to correct crowding. In 2005, unbeknownst to me, I gained a cavity. I'm extremely protective of my teeth and take very good care of them. So I was not too happy that my dentist referred me to an orthodontist to have my crowding situation fixed, which caused my cavity. It was not because of the way I was brushing my teeth or flossing or rinsing. It was solely because my wisdom teeth caused the crowding in my mouth. And so I needed braces. Not for a gap, but for crowding. I had no idea that people wore braces because of crowding. I was only aware that they wore it to close a gap. Currently, I have a permanent retainer to keep my teeth from shifting. And some of you may have a permanent retainer to keep your teeth from shifting. If you had a gap that was closed by a set of braces, it's appropriate to wear a retainer so that the gap does not open up again. We'll park on that. Again, start off innocuous and then we will move along. The gap doesn't look so scary, but the abyss does. In your top left, you see a gap that has essentially been closed by a pencil. And as an educator, I believe in closing the gap with a pencil. A pen, a marker, a plus sign, a subtraction sign, anything that can be placed in the middle of the gap so that people can walk across. What becomes scary is when we don't tend to the gap and we let the gap turn into an abyss. Now, I don't know anyone's TV preference or movie preference or reading preference, but I enjoy the movie 300 very much. One of my favorites. I see some nodding heads. Okay, show of hands, 300? Very well. King Leonidas was the man. Now, I'm also Episcopalian, and I've read in the book of Judges, around chapters 6 and 8, there's one of my favorite characters that pops up by the name of Gideon. And so whether you've seen the movie 300 or you've read about Gideon or you've done a combination of both, you may be familiar with the concept of war, fighting, one party against another. Someone needs to win. Well, in 300, Leonidas is standing sort of at the precipice of an abyss, and his wife is standing next to him, and there's a messenger who comes to send an unfavorable message. Anyone remember the scene? Leonidas sort of looks over at his wife. She looks at him. She does a little. And what does Leonidas do? He takes his foot, he leans back, and he kicks the messenger. I did it. And the messenger falls into this abyss, and he continues down. And we don't see the messenger ever again. I played this game on my iPad my brother got me hooked on called Fun Run. I don't know if anyone else plays Fun Run. If you don't play Fun Run, don't. It's addictive and it will eat up all your time. But there's this one board on Fun Run where you can use a superpower to catapult yourself. And you can catapult past the finish line. And you can catapult over a wall. And if you're the first person finished, if you go over that wall, you continue down into the abyss until the other players finish, and it finally cuts off. But it's sort of scary to see that your avatar is continuously falling without a place to be stopped until the other players stop the game, which stops you from falling, I suppose, at some point in time, but you're already into the abyss. The idea when we talk about closing the minority male achievement gap is to be sure that the gap does not turn into an abyss. That's a scary place to think about, particularly as a minority male in education. And I've been on this quest for quite some time to be sure that minority males do not fall into an abyss. And meanwhile, there's a gap that exists. I'm also keen to work on initiatives that make sure that the gap gets no bigger, that it increasingly gets smaller. At some point in time, someone like me won't return to this stage to talk about this topic because the gap will have been closed. That will be a really good day. But meanwhile, we have this gap that exists. And one of the things in presentations that can become uncomfortable is data, our data. And so we won't stay with this data for too long. I just want to point out that our good state of Delaware does experience a gap in achievement at the high school level. And there are studies that do comparisons between white and black students and white and Hispanic students. And I pulled the numbers here for the disparity between white and black students. Graduation rates, 88% white, 83% black. Not a terrible gap. Perhaps we should extend some prayers to Nevada and New Hampshire. And if we showed the rest of the states, we would see some more numbers that may be a bit scarier than what's going on in Delaware. As a native Delawarean, I can be proud of this number, but it needs to get better. So this is high school, but what happens at college, at the undergraduate level, at the master's level, and even more dismal, at the doctorate level? The statistics tell us that in 1999, there was about 4.1% of black and brown people earning doctorate degrees. Well, it's 2017 and the 2015 numbers have rolled out, and you might want to know that we have crept up to about 6.5%. Who's happy about that number? If you are, we should talk later. Who's not happy with that number? Then let's continue to talk now. One of the goals is to fill in that gap of brown students, black students, African American students, minority students, in particular minority male students, crossing that finish line of that educational paramount. But one person can't do it. Two people can't do it. It totally takes a team to close up the gap at the high school level, and even more so when students become more independent, to close up the gap at the college level. Well, some people and some things have given some insight on how to close the gap. And a quick shout out to my friend, the Reverend Joy Orr, and my friend Robert Trapp for introducing me to Senator Ophelia Ford. Is anyone here familiar with Senator Ford? If not, you may catch a few clips of her on YouTube. She's very, we'll say, energetic. After you watch her, let me know what you think about Senator Ford. But what she does is she calls attention to people in the Tennessee State Senate who should know better. And she tells them explicitly, you all need to get better. And she tells them, you need to get with the people that you need to get with so that you can get better. And she even uses the term get better knowledged. And I liked it, she said that. It's a little off color, but she said, you all need to get better knowledged. And when she was finished laying them out, because she did, she sat back in her chair and I caught her at the perfect moment. She pushed the button and ended it. And sort of left a gasp in the room thinking, we may want to follow what she says. And I took that to heart and I applied it to myself and thought, have I made the right connections with the right people who can help close the gap? Have I learned what I need to learn about the minority situation to help close the gap? Have I engaged people who don't look like me, who don't think like me, to help close the gap? And I believe that's what Senator Ford was impressing upon the folks in Tennessee as she talked to them about why they don't understand what's going on in their profession, that they should know. And again, I took it and applied it to myself as an educator. What I don't know, I should know, or I should get with the people who can help me know. If I am unsure of why a black or brown student, in particular my stance is a male, is not succeeding, I should ask. And I shouldn't just ask that person's teacher. I should ask the student. I shouldn't just ask their parent. I should ask the student. My job is to find out why the gap exists. I pretend to be a budding researcher, and I've done a gap analysis for my dissertation, thanks to my chair who steered me in the right direction. And so perhaps she was foreshadowing me being here today back in 2013, 2014, when she put me on the right track to investigate why gaps exist. And we'll talk a little bit about her in a few moments. There's this concept I want to get to as well about minding the gap, so keep that in your mind. But we'll deal with the past, present, and future for a few moments. And I love that there's a current day conversation going on about closing the minority male achievement gap. But we'd be remiss to not discuss any parts of the past as to why the gap exists. We should talk about how minority males end up in the prison system. We should talk about the police and correction system and how those things start to buck up against the minority male experience. We should talk about the institutions that are still trying to get their acts together by way of reaction or proaction in making the experience of the minority male even just a bit better will be helpful. I've worked in corporate, I work now in academia, and the institutions that I've worked for, I've been pretty lucky. They perhaps have been practicing, again, either proactive or reactive, but practicing nonetheless, good initiatives to close the gap. But where we want to get to is that future state where the gap is closed and I disappear from in front of you because I'm no longer needed. I pray for that day. We'll get there with focus, energy, and determination. And again, I'd like to note not just from people who look like me or for people who are currently experiencing the gap. It will take all of us to close it. Several of us can perhaps think of people in our past who helped create the gap. And so maybe the imperative is on people who may not look like me to actually help close it. Maybe we'll posit that for a few moments and sort of let us rest on it. But while you're resting on that point, let me move us forward to minding the gap. In 2013, I spent a wonderful week in London delivering training to my colleagues. And they were learning a new CRM system, customer relationship management system. And a huge privilege to go over there and train them. And I remember getting on the train and hearing the conductor say, "Mind the gap." And a few weekends ago, I went to DC, and I like to take the train to DC. And I could hear the conductor saying, "Mind the gap," and I'm thinking, oh, we've adopted some UK speak over here, great. I think London's a fascinating place. But as I was preparing to come to you today and sort of hearing that reaffirmation of minding the gap, I thought I would bring this in to talk a little bit about the train conductor gets it and reminds passengers all the time to mind the gap. So we started off with the innocuous place of minding the gap in our teeth, but a little bit less innocuous is minding the gap of the minority male and the achievement gap that exists. And so my idea is to be like the train conductor who is constantly reminding the passengers to mind the gap. And with that being said, I didn't quite get to make friends with the train conductor or even the folks who were working on the car service. Perhaps they got a little annoyed with me because I missed my train stop. Maybe I was fascinated with the gap that I saw in front of me and decided not to step off the train. For some reason on that Monday morning, I was hesitant to get off at the train stop in Wilmington and inadvertently took the train to Philadelphia. They were very helpful, but it also gave me a couple of more instances to hear mind the gap, which was okay. So I thought I'd bring along or introduce you to some of the folks who are gap minders, and a little less about me and perhaps a little more about them. You may recognize the guy over here, same over here. It's Dr. Dean Rob Resigno. He is my dean. And he's done so much great work up and down the state, and in fact, he's in Florida currently at an educational conference because he's not just concerned about the state of education in Delaware, but across the US. A little lesser known thing about Dr. Resigno is you may not know that he used to be the principal in the Milford school system. In fact, he was my parents' high school principal. But in his role as principal, would you know that he visited students' homes when they were absent from school? When they had behavioral problems in school, he went to their homes. Now, I know we're in 2017 now, so things are a bit differently. But he figured out a way to mind the gap back then, and we can figure out a way to mind it currently. We may not be able to go to every child's home, but when we see a behavioral issue or an academic issue, we need to be like the train conductor and remind us all to mind the gap. And Dean Resigno is still minding the gap. He minded at MBNA when he headed up the Delaware Scholars Program and was so generous in giving out those scholarships to many minority males who might otherwise be in a different position. I was a beneficiary of that program and certainly came through the ranks of MBNA and enjoyed a wonderful career. But it was on the heels of a man who didn't look like me who still decided to mind the gap. The picture there in the middle, you may recognize easily two people. It's Dr. Laura Johnson and Dr. Denise Berry, two of Deltec's finest, who I would also consider people who are concerned with minding the gap. To the left of them is Dr. Dom Pisano, Dr. Jen Garcia, and Dr. Steve Dorfman, who are other educators who don't look like me, who are still concerned with minding the gap. See, it matters not what you look like, but it matters what's in your heart. Up at the top left, you may recognize the gent in the wheelchair. He goes by the name of John Hollis. Mr. Hollis has been an educator in the state of Delaware for more than 35 years. He's the founder of Merit, Minority Engineering Regional Incentive Training. I love this man. I met this man in 1995 when I was in 7th grade and I became a student in Merit. And my little brother was a student in Merit. And we can tell you the benefits of Merit all day long. But Mr. Hollis also doesn't look like me. But he has been minding the gap for eons. To the left of Mr. Hollis is Keenan Mann, Shalina Terrell, myself in the back, Jeray Hudson, and David Clark, all alumni of Merit. In Merit, we come back as alumni to mind the gap. We come back as role models to the 7th through 12th graders who are currently in the program, so that they can see people who look like them, who have been successful, so that they know that there are options out there for them. The picture down in the bottom right. In the middle there is Dr. Toyin Fajimi. On the right of him is Dr. Gloria Matusiak, and yours truly. The two of us, along with Dr. Lynn Spenning in the middle picture, made up Toyin's 3-part dissertation committee. If you see there in the middle, Dr. Chrissy Miles, Dr. Lynn Spenning, and the three of us made up the dissertation committee for now Dr. Silas, Juan, Dara. I love these photos. They remind me of the work that I've done specifically to help usher people across the finish line who look like me. The bigger reminder is that there are people in these photos who look nothing like me, or the people who we helped cross the finish line. It matters not what we look like. It simply matters what's in our heart. These 3 photos, top left, the young man standing next to me, Gary, was one of my students in a research methods course at Newman, who at the end of 7 weeks came up to me and said, if it wasn't someone standing in the front of the room who looked like me, I may not have been successful in this course. He talked about the passion that he developed for something that he had no passion for. He also talked about his other courses that he sort of just went through because he didn't have someone who looked like him looking back at him with an expectation of greatness, of success, of you can do this, I did it. The bottom right, Dr. Julie Lanzillo, who hired me at Newman, who was also on my dissertation committee, who spends time with students ensuring that she gets the best out of them. And what I noticed is she spends a lot of time with minority male students. Perhaps she gets it. Perhaps she's been minding the gap. And then in the middle there's my rector, Father David. And I don't know if you know anything about the Episcopal Church. They are very on the front lines of social justice. which attracted me to that church. And so Father David has been at the head of not just minding the minority male achievement gap, but those related to other disparities in groups. Some gap minders who don't all look like me, but share a similar heart. This was my table of Black excellence, if you will. Bunch of vice presidents from financial services. Far left, Clara Brooks, Jocelyn Besserell, Ron Davis, Yolanda Crawford, Malika Vaughn, yours truly, and Wanda Hill. Wanda was a managing director at BNY Mellon, and she was my direct manager. And Wanda sent me to DC to a conference, the Executive Leadership Council. She didn't tell me what I was about to get into. I had no clue how encouraged I would be upon getting there and upon leaving, because there was everyone who looked like me who were doing it, and who were not just doing it for themselves, but they were telling stories about how they've affected the lives of other young people who were coming after them, how they've taken their money and their experience and their time and their energy and they pumped it back into their communities from whence they came, so that eventually we would have other people sitting around the table who looked like us because we were minding the gap. Wanda's now retired, I've now moved on, but we always keep in touch with one another in trying to figure out, what are we doing for our communities? How are we impacting the people who still need to be impacted? You may recognize two people in the photo on the right. They're sitting amongst us. At least one of them is. She works here, Miss Cynthia. She's one of my students. And I didn't see Kara come in, but Kara's one of my students. This was a picture from 2017. On the left was a picture from 2016. I like to celebrate with my classes. If you ever come to Wilmington University for your doctorate in ed or doctorate of business admin, you may line up with me as one of your professors, and I hope you find good favor there. But what I get the opportunity to do, particularly at the doctorate level, where there are less minority males who are enrolled, going through, and certainly finishing, is I get the fine opportunity to help mind the gap in a very unique and distinguished educational space. The far right picture, you may also see some other familiar educators, Dr. Nina Buchanan and Dr. Lynn Spinnen, who we met a few slides back. Sort of refer to her as my fairy godmother. This woman has taken me on and has dumped all of her research knowledge and educational knowledge into me so that I could become a good professor and continue to help mind the education gap. You educators out there, which I think probably, if not all of us, most of us are, even if you're not a classroom teacher, perhaps you can still fit into the mold of an educator. I believe one of our key jobs is to feel out our students, to figure out what's going on with them, see where the deficits are, see where the holes are, see where the gaps are, so that those gaps don't turn into an abyss. We have the tools, the skills, the support to do those things. And when they go undone, I would consider it to be that we just got lazy. And that's okay, we can all get lazy, but we can't stay lazy. Because if we stay lazy, we will certainly be scoffing at our privilege of being an educator. Now, I'll park that for a few moments as well. I love these pictures because they remind me of how I get to close gaps, of how I get to close loops, of how I get to work with students and hopefully inspire them to work with other students. I want to let you in on perhaps a little secret. Everyone ready? We all look ready. Perhaps this is seat-worthy. I wonder if you know that braids and a fade have nothing to do with hostility. They have nothing to do with violence. They have nothing to do with being uneducated. Perhaps they have something to do with culture. They may also have something to do with freedom and liberation, and perhaps self-awareness and being educated. I'm happy that my students get to see me in my braids and my fade, and I'm happy that hiring managers get to come and sit in my classroom where they have a professor who has braids and a fade, and a beard and sideburns, and brown skin, and in fact, very brown skin. I'm chocolate. Happily so. Thank you. Thank you very much. I consider, and current day research might suggest, that role modeling is one of the key ways we can mind the gap. And it's not just role modeling, again, from someone like me. Role modeling is bigger than just the look. It has a lot to do with the behavior. And so folks who don't look like me, as long as you're behaving in the spirit of positive role modeling, our students will be able to take something from it. What we're doing today is having meaningful programming, which also helps to create lasting and sustainable change. I would consider that several of my minority male students have been exposed to the gap or have been tossed in the gap because of lack of information or resources, which is an educator's job as well to provide those. And then on the heels of that, professional and personal development. How do we take care of ourselves professionally and personally so that we can continue to mind the gap? I would like to suggest that we can be the retainers that would support the work that the braces have done. The folks in this room can help mind the gap for the minority male to make sure that the achievement gap closes, disappears, does not turn into an abyss, and then I can shut up. Thank you.